Imagine that the date is January the 1st of the year 2100 and that you are living in this futuristic time. Imagine that you are waking up in your bedroom. Your bed has computer sensors and these sensors are connected to your contact lenses. Imagine the sensors in your bed and around the house are collecting data about you, including your state of health and making adjustments to your physical parameters accordingly. Imagine the Internet of Things eventually extending to virtually all objects. That is to say that in the year 2100 you will have robot mirrors, robot trash cans, robot refrigerators and cooks, robot cars, and so on. Imagine you checking your email or watching a funny YouTube video about cats riding on skateboards, not through a big bulky laptop or iPhone, but a thin and flexible sheet that displays a computer desktop screen. Something so compact that you can roll up into a scroll and fit inside the interior of your pocket. Imagine in the year 2100 using your contact lenses to access the internet or requesting your artificial intelligence assistant to open up your email or YouTube. Imagine you are able to use sheer thoughts alone to move the cursor of your computer screen, click things, and type sentences. Imagine all of these things and more taking place in the year 2100 and beyond. Now, in this video documentary, the fourth in a series of its kind, I will be taking you on an amazing imaginary trip into the fabulous world of the 22nd century.
A recent survey involving over 1,000 of the world's leading experts in artificial intelligence determined that there is a 90% chance that superhuman-level artificial general intelligence, also known as SAGI, will be developed by the year 2100. Thus, the artificial intelligence assistant on our computer interface would be infinitely more intelligent than Siri or Alexa or Cortana used in today's computers. Such superhuman-level artificial general intelligence could answer any question posed by you if you happen to be a citizen of this or other planets. We'll be colonizing in the year 2100. Today, computers are dumb machines that follow human instruction, but in the year 2100, it will be the reverse. At any rate, Those contact lenses that you might be wearing, if you belong to Generation Beta and you happen to be alive then, will make you a kind of enhanced human with superior knowledge and intelligence. This is now being increasingly referred to as transhumanism.
Using enormous digging machines, vast and complicated tunnel systems would be built connecting each of our cities in the year 2100. Those tunnels would incorporate magnetic levitation or maglev trains which would be used by lunar and Martian residents to commute from one city to another. To make the trips less boring, tiny LEDs would be placed in all of the train's windows, generating moving images of a certain environment. In the year 2100, not only will there be subterraneous maglev transportation, but also flying drones, capable of transporting passengers between gargantuan cities which float freely in space. Earth would be surrounded by a great orbital ring which would be connected to the central domes of each of the major cities on Earth with space elevators. One of the major engineering challenges of the 22nd century is to build many dynamic orbital rings which float freely around the Earth. Those rings would be capable of rotating and moving a space elevator from one city to another. In the year 2100, there will be terrestrial cities, subterranean cities, cities in space, cities on multiple worlds, cities on the surface of the oceans, cities within the volumes of the oceans, and maybe if we are really ambitious there could even be cities on the seafloor. Super strong tethers, perhaps comprised of carbon nanotubes, could be attached at the seafloor and run all the way up to the orbital ring. This would enable convenient transportation of passengers and cargo from between the orbital ring, cities located within the vicinity of that orbital ring, cities on the surface of the sea, cities within the volume of the sea, and perhaps even cities on or underneath the seafloor. There's also the possibility of a vast and complicated network of transparent, underwater tunnels which would connect to each and every underwater city. Life in the year 2100 and beyond would be astonishingly different than what it is today. And the gap in technology between the 22nd century and beyond descendants and us would be more dramatic than the gap in technology between us and cavemen. And every little detail about the quality of their lives and the way that they live would be profoundly different from ours. In our time, one must wear large goggles to experience augmented reality or virtual reality. According to Elon Musk, the graphics generated by video games in the future will eventually become indistinguishable from reality. Thus, the holograms which users see while in augmented reality or virtual reality in the year 2100 could be made to have an amount of resolution which is totally indistinguishable from reality. In our time, we also have special gloves which users can wear which allow them to touch a hologram. These gloves use haptic technology to generate pressure on one's hands when they touch a 3D hologram. As time progresses, such technology will become more and more refined. Eventually, I imagine that users will, not need goggles to generate augmented or virtual realities. Instead, they will be able to just use their contact lenses. And instead of gloves, a special layer of transparent skin could cover the users, allowing them to touch and feel holograms in augmented or virtual realities. The holograms which people talk to could also have superhuman-level artificial general intelligence built in them.
In the year 2100, we'll also have orbital rings, which are giant rings that would surround our planet. They are the prelude to space and the complete colonization of our solar system. Today, it is very expensive to go to space. This is because, with present methods, we must use big bulky rockets that consume a lot of fuel to get something to space. Indeed, in the year 2021, a 12-day stay in a space hotel might cost $9.5 million. But with an orbital ring, all of that changes. If we had an orbital ring, we could send people to space for a cost comparable to that of a plane ticket. This would cause quite the boom in the space tourism industry. For the first time in our species' history, millions and eventually billions of us would be commuting between Earth and space every year due to the ultra-low cost to go to space in the year 2100. With all of those people and cargo going to space, you would need to build a lot of new living space and facilities up there. Those living areas and facilities could be megastructures like the Stanford Torus or the Bernal Sphere. Those megastructures could accommodate up to 10,000 people each. But we did have so many people going to space that it would also make sense to build things like the O'Neill cylinder, a type of megastructure which can accommodate up to several million people. But what would we humans do after that? It turns out that the answer would be to, inevitably and certainly, go on to colonize the entire solar system, and then the entire Milky Way galaxy, and then other galaxies as well. But how would using orbital rings help us to colonize the solar system? How would that work? Well, the nice thing about orbital rings is that you can build them around almost any massive body including planets, moons, stars, and even black holes. So, you could build these orbital rings around Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the Sun for example. Another thing that's nice about orbital rings is that you can build a bunch of them side by side until they start looking like a sphere. You could build cities and an atmosphere and have life forms on the surface of that sphere and they would all be held there and glued to that sphere's surface by its gravity. As a result, basically what you'd have is an artificial planet with Earth-like gravity and Earth-like features. These artificial planets are called supermundane planets. Another nice thing about orbital rings is that you can build many orbital rings around a mass, but have those rings be of different sizes. This would allow you to build differently sized shells with different radii around a massive body. This is called a shell world. With the use of this method of shelling overworlds, as well as other methods like building artificial space habitats and terraforming planets, we, and by that, I mean the beta and later generations, could effectively colonize the entire solar system. Building something like a supermundane planet or a shell world around any of the 4 gas giant planets in our solar system would be especially useful. This is because we could attach vast mega skyscrapers to the ceilings of such artificial worlds and use them to extract useful materials like helium-3 and deuterium from the gas giant's atmosphere. These types of mega skyscrapers are known as gas giant refineries. That helium-3 and deuterium which we extract from the atmosphere could be used as fuel for interstellar arc ships headed off to all the other nearby star systems.
Japanese company Obayashi has announced that they will have a space elevator constructed by 2050. The elevator will reach 96,000 kilometers into space and will transport people and cargo to a new space station. As the name suggests, a space elevator would be an elevator ride quite literally to space. The notion of a tall, skinny physical structure extending from Earth to space was first contemplated in the story of Babel over 2,000 years ago. The authors imagined building a great tower, which was taller than the biggest tree or mountain, extending from the surface of the Earth all the way through the sky and into heaven. There are also more modern stories of this notion including Jack and the Beanstalk, a story that captured my imagination as a child. It is the opinion of experts that a space elevator might be the first transportation system that we build. Now, there are other options such as the orbital ring, which is, in all respects, superior to the space elevator, the launch loop, a star tram, or an Atlas tower. Even if it does in fact turn out to be the case that the space elevator is built first, an orbital ring would be attached to the Earth by space elevators. So, even if we build the superior orbital ring or if we don't build one, the space elevator would still be used to get people and cargo to space. A space elevator would decrease the cost of sending things to space so much that, for the first time in human history, thousands and eventually millions of people would be able to visit space. This would be a revolution. It would mark the beginning of a new epoch in human history.
We wouldn't merely just want to visit space, but we'd eventually want to settle space by building space-based cities and infrastructures. Today, private space industries like Elon Musk's SpaceX and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin want to build permanent homesteads and human settlements on the Moon or Mars. This might eventually happen, but it would come with enormous difficulties. The first humans to live on the Moon or Mars would need to live in underground buildings or in settlements covered by either lunar or Martian regolith in order to shield human inhabitants from radiation. But eventually, what we could do is build domed cities on these worlds, or underground cities which Elon Musk would like to create on Mars. Such cities could indeed accommodate millions of people and shield them from radiation coming from the sun and space. But there would be many additional issues that would come with living in an outer world. In the case of the Moon and Mars, these worlds have 1/6 and 1/3 the gravity of Earth, respectively. This means that you'd weigh a mere 1/6 or 1/3 what you would weigh on the Earth depending on which of these worlds you were living on. We now know that even if you could live on the Moon and be protected from radiation, you'd still experience muscle atrophy and bone loss due to the ultra-low gravity. As for living on Mars, we're not yet quite sure what the long-term negative health effects would be from living in a world with only 1/3 the gravity as that of the Earth's.
Far larger than any conventional space station, O'Neill cylinders could potentially serve as entire city-states or nature preserves. These megastructures may represent a superior option to terraforming planets. An O'Neill cylinder is essentially a space city that is a pair of two gigantic, rotating cylinders that are 20 miles long and 5 miles wide that humans could comfortably live in. The interior of an O'Neill cylinder would be homely incorporating, as O'Neill once envisioned, lovely river streams and lush forests, its own hydrologic cycle consisting of weather, an atmosphere, and even rainfall, an expansive city covering 500 square miles and homing a population of several million residents, and even its own day and night cycle. Both of the cylinders would rotate at a specific angular speed which would generate centrifugal forces everywhere along the interior surface, which would pull everything down towards the surface simulating artificial gravity, and each cylinder would rotate in the opposite direction in order to eliminate precession.
The concept of the ocean spiral was first unveiled by Shimizu Corporation, in conjunction with Tokyo University and Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology, in 2014. The company expects it to take 5 years to build an ocean spiral. These structures are enormous helical structures that would descend from the surface of the sea all the way down to the seafloor. On the top of the ocean spiral, you would have cities right there on the surface of the sea, and you'd also have cities underneath the seafloor. Water worlds are typically much larger and much more massive than our own. Paul Birch in his papers imagined the possibility of underground orbital rings. Indeed, underwater orbital rings would work too. We could build many underwater orbital rings which are oriented at equal angles with respect to the equator of a water world and build a spherical surface over those orbital rings. Such a shell would be built at just the right radius where the surface of that shell would have Earth-like gravity. We could then build enormous domes on the surface of that shell and connect them by underwater transparent tunnels in which maglev vehicles move passengers from one underwater city to another. Not only could the tunnels be transparent, but so too could be the domes, now that could make for some pretty spectacular sightseeing, especially if those oceans were inhabited by spectacular life forms and if great feats of underwater architecture and engineering were built in the depths of those oceans. People living in these underwater cities or taking a ride on the maglev train through those transparent tunnels could witness such life forms and such architecture.
As mind-boggling as all of these ideas about life in the year 2100 might be, it may turn out that we've only just scraped the surface. Nevertheless, the ideas we discussed in this video documentary could represent some of the most far-reaching and extravagant ideas in all of science and engineering. Indeed, these ideas could be far more extraordinary and more inspiring than even the most imaginative literature in science fiction and mythology in human history. As Michio Kaku, a famous American theoretical physicist, futurist, and popularizer of science, once said, "By 2100, our destiny is to become like the gods we once worshipped and feared. But our tools will not be magic wands and potions but the science of computers, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and most of all, the quantum theory."